Digicams. There's just something about the photos these cameras take. Dreamy, film-like, ethereal. In this video, I'm going to break apart what makes the Digicam look and see if I can recreate it through post-processing in the Unreal Engine. So, what's the difference between these cameras and modern cameras? Well, on paper, they're much worse. There's a worse dynamic range, the image is noisy, there's no HDR, it's a lower resolution, low FPS. These limitations are mainly due to its sensor. It's a CCD cam sensor. Oh, I'm running out of battery. Whereas I have to do this quick. Whereas modern cameras like this Fujifilm I'm filming on and smartphones use a CMOS sensor. CMOS? CMOS? I need to clean this mirror. It's so dirty. CCD sensors work by capturing light on an array of pixels, then streaming the electrons down a grid to be converted into a voltage and then read out as a digital value. CMOS sensors convert the electrons to voltages within each pixel, so you don't have to spend time moving the electrons around. So do the sensors create different images? I went out and took some comparison shots between this Digicam from 2009 and my iPhone 13. You can see what I mean with the dynamic range. With the iPhone, no detail is lost, while the Digicam is completely blown out in the light and is so much darker in the shadows. And yet, I actually prefer the Digicam photos. The HDR post-processing on the iPhone makes everything look flat and less dramatic. Also, the image is almost too sharp. Look at the leaves in this example, they're just straight up look ugly. Whereas the Digicam has a soft glow, and the sky looks so much more bright. While the post-processing on the iPhone makes a more consistent image, it just feels more fake. That being said, these Digicams have their own post-processing built in too. Each brand has slightly different color settings. I'd turn off HDR on the iPhone photos for like a better comparison, but in the latest iPhones, Apple doesn't allow you to turn off the HDR. For some reason. It's a lost art. I've been looking at these old photos on Flickr to get a better idea of the different kinds of Digicam palettes that can happen. And I think I'm ready to jump into Unreal and try to actually recreate this look. There's two main things we're going to be tweaking, our main cine camera and this post-processing volume. Let's start by limiting the dynamic range of the camera. In the color grading, I've bumped up the contrast to 1.2, gamma to 1.2, and gain to 1.1. I've created this post-processing material that clamps down the high and low values to create that washed out film look. The sky is starting to look completely blown out, which is what we're going for. While we're here, let's slow down the auto exposure a ton, so that when we move from dark to light, the camera has to take a second to adjust the exposure. Next, I added some film-like color grading. I added a little bit of orange to the shadow and blues to the highlight. A ton of Digicam examples I've seen look way colder too, so I lowered the temp down to 4,500. Chromatic Aberration. Okay, chromatic aberration gets a bad rap because artists tend to overdo it a bit, a lot. Looking at some Digicam photos, it's clear that there is a chromatic aberration going on, but it's on the edges and it's subtle. You have to treat it like a spice. Just add a little bit. You don't want to overpower the dish. I'm using an intensity of 0.5 and an offset of 0.3. That's all you need. You can't even tell it's there, but look at the difference when I toggle it. For the noise, we're going to be using the film grain settings. However, film grain and CCD noise have a slightly different texture. I created a new texture that looks more like the colorful CCD noise and added that in with a pretty low intensity. You probably can't even see it with the video compression. Here, I'll crank it up. Next was the field of view, FOV, and this was a struggle. Unreal has these cinecams that you can use to simulate real camera specs, so I created one, plugged in the sensor size and the focal length of 35mm, and why is everything so zoomed in? There must be something I'm missing with this. If anyone knows, please tell me. Unreal's documentation it's unhelpful. It's not good, okay? It's not good. I decided to just do some measurements in the real world to figure out what the FOV should be. Okay, so I came up with an experiment. What I can do is I can measure the height of my guitar here and then see how far back I have to go so that the tip of the guitar is just at the top of the frame. So, kind of close here. 109 centimeters. 207. Okay, so I set up the same distances in Unreal. This cube here is 109 centimeters tall, and it is 207 meters back. Then I have my Cinecam on the ground here. And we can see this is 35, and this is way too zoomed in. If I zoom it out, eventually we hit the top, all the way at like 5.78 focal length, so that's the number I'm gonna go with. That doesn't seem right, there must be something I'm missing, but... These precise measurements worked out to an FOV of around 55 degrees, which feels right to me. It's a little more zoomed in than a standard first-person game, but not super zoomed in. Speaking of zooming, these Digicams can zoom. A lot of these cameras have a optical zoom as well as a digital zoom to go even further in, which sounds cool, but it's literally just scaling the image up. Like you could see the pixels. So I added this post-processing effect that just scales the image up. Whenever you hit the zoom button, it zooms in and out. You can get some surprisingly nice depth of field shots with these cameras, so I cranked the aperture all the way down to 0.4. I added this little autofocus script as well to adjust the focal distance. I shoot a line trace out the front of the camera. If it hits something, we take that distance in meters. If it doesn't hit anything, then we just set it to the max distance of 1,000 meters. In the real world, the autofocus has to physically move to adjust. So I added some math and lerping on the delta time to smoothly adjust the camera focus to the target focus. Okay, this is a little too good. Let's slow it down. Now it's accurately simulating how annoying it is to get the camera to autofocus. Digicams have a unique glitch effect. Whenever there's a bright light in the shot, these purple lines appear. But what are these? Well, it's bloom. Let me explain. Bloom happens when a pixel on a sensor grid gets overwhelmed with the amount of light coming in. Its capacitor can't take in any more electrons, so they start to spill out to the surrounding pixels. Remember how CCD sensors have to move the electrons around to get converted? Well, that creates a weakness in the vertical direction, creating a vertical bloom effect. When the whole row gets overwhelmed, it glitches out. I always thought the directional bloom was just an aesthetic of the 2000s for like typography or something. I even used the effect all over my game Kitten Burst. I didn't realize that this effect is literally emulating how blooms in old cameras looked. So let's use the bloom in Unreal to recreate this. Unreal by default uses a Gaussian-based bloom, but we can change it to a convolution bloom that uses an image for reference. There's some built-in ones you could try out. This one makes everything look like the Matrix. I created my own bloom texture that has a bit of surrounding bloom and a pale purple line running down the middle. You can see the glitch now when I look at the sun. This texture also creates that directional blooming that we were seeing. Alright, now how well did Digicams perform in the dark? Pretty bad. I'm using the plugin Ultra Dynamic Sky for this example, which simulates different times of day. I'm going to set the night brightness almost all the way down. You'll need a source of light to actually see anything at night. Luckily, there's a bit of moonlight that's casting a soft blue light over our scene. Wait, how come photos of the moon don't look blue in my reference photos though? Can Digicams not see the blue light of the moon? Well, it turns out, moonlight isn't blue. When you look around at night, what colors do you see? For me, there's this soft blue fuzz blanketing everything. Even outside at night, if there's no artificial light, I can see this blue fuzz. In paintings and games and films, night is often depicted this way, with the moon casting this eerie blue light over everything. This matches what you see, but when you take a picture, the image appears way warmer. It's not the camera that's miscalibrated, it's our eyes. Our eyes have rods and cones that sense light. The cones are used during the day and rods at low light. However, the rods are much more sensitive to lower wavelengths like blue and greens, so at night, reds appear more dull and blues appear more vibrant. This is called the Purkinje effect. I first read about this in the book Color and Light by James Gurney. I should note that he argues that there's something else going on. When it's completely dark, only the rods should be active, which are monochromatic, but there's still that blue fuzz. There's a theory that there's some spillover between the rods and blue cones that tricks the brain into perceiving a tinge of blue light. Moonlight, when measured, is actually more orange than sunlight. So when we take a photo of our cameras, that's actually closer to reality than what we perceive. But when we're making paintings and games and films, are we trying to capture reality or our perception of reality? Well, in this case, I'm trying to emulate a camera, so the moon is orange. Okay, well, now we need something to deal with this darkness, so I added a flashlight. This doesn't really feel like it's in the Digicam spirit, does it? It just looks like a horror game. Digicams don't have a flashlight, they have a flash light. Well, you can't see anything. I really like how flash photography looks with Digicams. It makes everything look super ethereal and dramatic, and is super flattering for some reason. So I made the cone of my flashlight much larger and decreased the range. Then I added a flash button that simulates the flash of a camera with a slow fall off, so it's not too stroby. Nice, this is much less terrifying. Also, those ghost orbs that you sometimes see at night with flash photography, most of the time those are just out of focus pieces of dust. Sometimes they're actually ghosts. If I add some dust particles, I can recreate that too, now with the flash. It looks so good. It looks so good. Okay, final touches. The camera shoots at a 4:3 aspect ratio, which is the aspect ratio of this video, so we're good there. But it only shoots at 640 by 480 resolution at 29.97 FPS, so let's lower everything down. And then scale it back up so you can actually see it. That's as far as I've gotten. What do you think? It definitely still reads like CGI to me, but some shots get really close to tricking you. Anyways, thanks for watching. Oh, and play Kitten Burst. It's out now. It's really good, I promise. And subscribe to follow along with my next project. I just wish modern cameras could actually have these filters built in, you know? Like imagine if the iPhone, all these filters are just like color palette changes. But what if we could recreate how disposable cameras work, or digicams, or film cams? I think that would be way cooler. Or at least let us turn off the HDR, please. Why can't we do that? Why can't we turn off the HDR?